Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to East Central Missouri and the world, and welcome to the James Strong Show podcast number 145. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for making us a part of your day. I appreciate it. This podcast was recorded on the evening of Tuesday, October 29th, from the James Strong Studio in western St. Charles County. There was no podcast this weekend because I was on holiday. And you may have seen some of the Facebook posts. I normally don't post to Facebook when I'm on vacation. This time I did because there were some exceptional things that happened. We were camping in Southern California, and we had fires, 2 fires. And but the probably the most exciting, the most amazing things about this vacation is it was a camping vacation, and the trophy wife came with me. My lovely wife came camping with me. And not only did she come camping with me on this trip, but she has graciously agreed to sit in on the podcast and help explain this great adventure we had. Hi, sweetheart. How are you?
I'm just fine. How are you?
I'm great. I'm tanned, rested, and ready, I guess, to go back to work, right? We had a good time.
I had a great time.
And actually, the weather was warm. Is in the low 90s some days. Always got into the 70s or close to 70. I guess the last day was 70 degrees. But then we came back to the freezing cold. Well, not freezing cold, but relatively cold weather of the Midwest. But you actually went on a camping trip with me.
I actually went on a camping trip, and I didn't hate it.
For years, I've been trying to convince my wife, who a long time ago, she would go camping. It was never her thing, but she would go. And about 6 months ago, maybe, I started planning this. And I mentioned, I might want to go to Malibu and go camping. You want to come along? And we started talking about compromise, I guess. Because normally my camping trips are 3 days camping, then 1 day in civilization where you can get a shower, a meal, a rest in a bed, then you come home. And you came to me with, I guess we'd call it a proposal, whereas, you know what, if we do some compromising, I'll go on this trip with you. Instead of 3 nights in a tent and 1 night in a hotel, how about 2 nights in a tent and 2 nights in a hotel? And make it a good hotel.
It worked.
And it worked. It worked.
And I don't know if your listeners understand that your idea of a camping trip is doing precisely the same thing as you wrote down before you left without any variation.
I have an itinerary. I like to plan. I like to have meals planned. I like to have...
No, I eat hot dogs on Thursday. You can't possibly have a chicken sandwich on Thursday.
But I didn't do that.
No, you didn't.
I didn't do that. See, I compromised. It was only 2 nights in a tent, 2 nights in a hotel. We only cooked breakfast. We had coffee and oatmeal for breakfast, and we went out for lunch and dinner.
Yes.
And the camping trip, by the way, it was not out in the middle of nowhere. It was hardly in the middle of nowhere. The camping trip was in Malibu, California. And you think to yourself, whoa, look at this, Mr. and Mrs. Hoity-toity in Malibu. Well, it was a camping trip. It's a real campground. You sleep in a tent on the ground, right?
Right. On an air mattress on the ground.
Well, she slept on an air mattress. I didn't. But that made the trip tolerable for you.
Tolerable, yes.
But
like I said, I didn't hate it.
You didn't hate it. Maybe you didn't love it, but you didn't hate it. And I'm going to go ahead and have you commit right now because something you told me, and I don't go lying. You actually said you might do it again.
I might. Not anytime soon.
No, not anytime soon. I get it. But you would consider doing it again.
I would consider it again.
Well, the trip was kind of short. We started on a Thursday, came back on a Monday. Thursday morning up at 3:30 a.m. Went to my folks' house. In fact, my parents I grew up real close to the airport. My parents still live real close to the airport. So we got to their house. Dad dropped us off at the airport. And we caught the 7:10 flight to LAX. 3.5 hour flight. Usually I thought it was about 4 hours, but this time it was 3.5 hours. Maybe we had a tailwind, who knows. But I'm reading The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas. I always love to read on a plane. That's my secret to reading a lot. Read on a plane. And you were reading too, I think.
I read too. I'm reading William Faulkner.
Are you asking or telling?
I think his first name is William. I know his last name is Faulkner.
Yes.
Light in August is the name of the book I'm reading.
What's the name of it?
Light in August.
Very good. Is it a good book?
It's a very good book.
The classics.
I have a way to go.
I love reading the classics, as do you. And Alexander Dumas is one of the greatest authors of all time, French author. And The Count of Monte Cristo is one of those 1,400-page long books that'll take a while to read, but very entertaining. Well, we had the bags all loaded and got off the plane, took the bags down, took the shuttle to Enterprise rental car, negotiated an upgrade. I always love to do that. I always rent the cheapest car I can and then negotiate a nicer car for no extra cash.
Well, you call it negotiating. It looked more like a swindle to me.
It wasn't a swindle. Then you know what? You do the description.
You go to the counter, you say you want the car you reserved, you get with the young, inexperienced guy out on the lot.
The representative, the representative agent.
You know, you might as well just give me that BMW. And he looked at you and rolled his eyes, and you said, "Nah, that's okay. I'll just take an SUV." You swindled the guy. No, I didn't
swindle. I didn't swindle him. I asked him.
Poor guy. They probably took it out of his paycheck.
I did not. I rented a pickup truck because that's the cheapest they had, and I said, I don't have to have a pickup truck. He said, "Well, that's what you rented." I said, "I know, but I just rented it because it was the cheapest. If you have something else, I wouldn't mind having that." And he says, "Well, I can give you a small economy car." I said, "Nah, I don't want that. We're going camping. You see all the bags we have." And I said, pointing to that big BMW SUV, and said, "How about that?" And he says, "Oh, I can't do that for you. But how about a Kia Sonata? Was it a Sonata? Sonata?
I think Sonata's a Hyundai, but we had a Kia. It was a Kia. It was some SUV.
It was the SUV Kia. It was nice. It was fine. It was very good, and I got it for the right price. So we loaded all of our stuff up into the SUV. Had breakfast at the Denny's there in Inglewood, just up the street from the rental car place. Again, the same thing I do when I land in LAX. You have breakfast at Denny's. I used to have breakfast at the Denny's on Century Boulevard, but that's when I used to rent from Fox Rental Car and not Enterprise. So new rental car place, new location, new Denny's. See, so I compromise a little bit.
Such a compromise.
That's right. We had 2 Grand Slam breakfasts, filled our belly up with greasy food, and took Manchester Road to the Pacific Coast Highway through Santa Monica, through Pacific Palisades, and into Malibu. Stopped at a grocery store called Ralph's, which is a popular store out in Southern California. Kroger owns Ralph's, so basically it's a Kroger store. I guess close to, what would you compare it to out here?
Deerberg's.
Maybe a Deerberg's, yeah. Kind of an upscale, nice place, but you can get anything you want, okay? We checked into the Malibu Beach RV, what would you call it?
Park. RV park.
An RV park, yeah. They have a lot of RV spots, but they also have tent camping as well, which is what we got. Always like to get the point, and the point is the best spot, the best tent spot they have. And I asked for the point, and they said, we're going to give you this one instead. And I'm looking at it. I said, was the point occupied? And they said, oh, no, it was, but the wind, they had heavy winds there last Thursday. And they said the winds are so strong that basically kind of blew the tents off of the point. So nobody's staying up there. So we took their word for it and stayed just one step down from the point. But we still had an ocean view, right?
It was beautiful. The view was beautiful. And when you say we camping, there were a total of 2 campsites being used out of about 35.
Well, it was the middle of the week. Well, Thursday. Pardon me. It was Thursday. Kids are not in school. This is off-peak season, October. As the weekend came, more people came. But
one or two.
it was not jam-packed, to be fair. But we set up for camp, and because it was too windy on the point. But it was windy off the point, too. In fact, we had some difficulty setting up the tent. But we did. We set up camp, and we walked down to the beach. First thing we did, because this camp sits up on a ridge, and you overlook the Pacific Coast Highway. So you walk down a hill across the Pacific Coast Highway, and there's the beach. And we walked on the beach for a while. But if anybody is reading the newspapers or listening to the radio or watching television, you can see that they have a lot of problems in Malibu with, or Southern California and Northern California, with the fires and the winds. So basically it was in the low 90s, 2 to 7% humidity, and gusty winds 40, 45 miles an hour. That first 24 hours we were there, we drank 10.5 liters of water and barely peed because the water just, the wind and the heat sucked the life out of you.
It was like there was an enormous hairdryer. It felt like hairdryer air. It was so hot, and it was blowing so hard.
That's a good way to describe it. And in fact, you had trouble even walking up the hill. You had to stop and rest. And
I was so dehydrated.
Yeah, you were done. Went and got the car to pick you up, but by then you'd walked up the hill, and it was fine. But then we had dinner.
Dinner was great.
Yeah, after we sat in the shade and rested and cooled down, and the temperature, as the sun began to set, the temperature got cooler too.
But the air got smoky.
Yeah, the air got smoky because about 50 miles north of us in Santa Clarita was the tick fire. And while it was 50 miles away, the smoke and the ash had come into our camp. And it was actually kind of hard to breathe. It got cooler, but the ash came down into the tent. And it was hard to breathe. So we went down to the beach and had dinner at the Malibu Fish House. I had snapper. I think you had snapper too.
I had snapper too.
Yeah. I mean, fresh caught snapper was wonderful. By this time, it's about 8 o'clock. And you got to figure, that's 8 o'clock California time, 10 o'clock St. Louis time. And we had been up since 3:30 in the morning. So we're beat.
I was dead.
I was too. And by then it had cooled down some, but the wind was still just roaring. We get into the tent. It's full of sand.
Not quite full of sand, but there was some grit in there where we wanted to lay down.
And it was so fine. I thought it was ash. And I think it was some ash, but primarily sand and dirt and dust. We were so tired, we just went to sleep. I'm not going to say I didn't mind, but you never complained.
I didn't. I was more tired than anything.
Yeah, it was tough. It was hard. But the tick fire had 4,000 acres of what it had burned already, and it was 0% contained at that point. And by the way, on the way up from dinner, we did stop, or on the way up from the beach, we did stop and ask them about evacuations, because that campground had burned down last year, and they just finished rebuilding it. They had just rebuilt it. I think they said it opened on July the 1st. So
I don't think they're done rebuilding it.
No, because
the office was in a temporary modular building. It wasn't a stick building.
No, it was just like a portable trailer they had brought in. And in fact, we asked them, "Are you going to rebuild this?" They said, maybe after the fire season this year, because they weren't sure it was not going to burn. And you could see some of the trees and palm trees had burned, and the trunks were still black. But the vegetation had come back because they had a wet winter, which means that they had a wet winter and a dry summer, so there was a lot of fuel again, and the fires began once again. But they said that they would come up and evacuate us. The sheriff would come, tell us to evacuate, and so we could go to sleep and not worry about being burned alive. And that was, I guess, reassuring, somewhat.
Somewhat.
And we did meet a young man there from Switzerland. Tell that story about that guy, because you talked to him more than I did.
I did. I don't know if I ever learned the guy's name, but he was in his early 20s, maybe 24 years old. And when I saw him, he had no tent, but he had a small container, is the best way to describe what he had, with one wheel, with a harness on it. And I asked him, was he staying